Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Welcome back. It's another episode of the Koala Podcast. And I've got Chris Fontes, co-founder of High Spirits, on the line this morning, talking to us koalas up the tree. I found a bio of him, so I'm going to read that out first. So just to give you a bit of Chris's background, and then we can sort of dive into what the current issues are. We've got about 30 minutes. But we'd need about 300 minutes just to cover 10% of it, I think, these days. Chris is the co-founder and CEO of High Spirits, the first brand to successfully bring hemp-derived Delta-9 THC to market at a national scale. Cannabis and hemp policy leader, best known for pioneering federally compliant THC and helping shape the modern psychoactive hemp market. So we have him to blame for everything that's happening. I'm only teasing. The lifelong... Fontes began his career in tech and leveraged his expertise to create Hemp Exchange and Project Hemp Flower, where he compiled complex regulations, countless products, and diverse operators throughout the country into practical e-commerce platform for the hemp industry, which I'm very interested in learning more about. While immersing himself in the hemp industry, Fontes identified a legal pathway for intentionally dosed hemp-derived Delta-9 THC products via the 2018 Farm Bill. He created Trojan Horse, which is a perfect name, Cannabis, with the first intentionally dosed Delta-9 products before founding High Spirits to catalyze, as it says here, an entirely new consumer category that's become a multi-billion-dollar industry in just a few years. So, Chris, the first question to ask is, why aren't you living in Dubai? I'm only teasing.
I wish.
You wish not, I would assume.
Yeah.
Look, Chris, thanks. I am finding hemp increasingly confusing, and part of that reason is because I'm actually building a platform that's similar to what you're doing, where I've built a thing called LexiCan, which is going to contain all primary, secondary, and then case materials to cannabis and hemp-related law around the planet. And I'm just about to try, we've just put up all the cannabis stuff, and I'm just about to try and tackle hemp and work out how to present that. And as I dive deeper and follow the daily news about hemp in the US on a state and a federal level, my head literally spins. And look, I probably give 30% of my thinking time to hemp. Where are we now in terms of what the federal government is discussing? And then we can pop down with a couple of state examples. I find, for example, Ohio just sends, literally my head just explodes every time I read about Ohio and the latest amendment to a piece of hemp legislation.
Yeah, great question. Where we're at right now is a bit of a black box. As you're well aware, and I'm sure your viewers and listeners are probably well aware, back in November, we had federal legislation that did pass. It was a more or less slammed into a much larger vehicle to reopen our government by approving a budgetary spending bill. And essentially, someone very craftfully made Congress make a decision: reopen the government and ban hemp.
It was the old slip it in something else routine, wasn't it?
It sure was. So we lost that one, unfortunately. But the good news for us is what that legislation does is it alters the definition of hemp at a federal level, and that does not yet take effect. So while that law has passed and is law today, the law also that says the definition does not actually change until November of next year. So there's a 1-year delay from when it was signed into law into when this.
And who has to work on the rules and regs for that? Which government department?
Well,
right, that's why I ask you. That's I know it makes me laugh, but I mean, this is the issue with the EO in November is, everybody waves their hands in the air and it's all really exciting, but it's just saying, okay, you put that in your filing cabinet.
I almost don't know there's a department that it doesn't touch if you really want to be expensive, but immediately touching and most concerning or most prevalent would be FDA.
Yeah.
potentially TTB. If things change, right now TTB doesn't touch it, but FDA and USDA today, as it stands, would need to figure something out on how to manage this. USDA already manages the crop. They manage all the way up to the point of cutting it, basically, and giving their approval to cut. And then FDA basically regulates everything from that point forward as long as it's below the 0.3%. But FDA said you're not allowed to do any of this. So it doesn't really change much of FDA's standpoint. They probably need to do more than they're doing, as I think everyone knows. But if nothing else changes, FDA can keep doing nothing, and eventually the problem will, I guess, fix itself to some extent because there won't be much of an industry left to regulate. So FDA will be like, hey, we don't have to do anything now. That said, that's in direct contradiction with the executive order, with the Medicare reimbursement program for full spectrum hemp products. So pinning anything down on this is where it's at right now is super difficult because we're living in a world of massive contradictions. And
well, that's what I was about to say, because each state, we've had this pushback because an illegal black market flourished for a period of time and nobody could be bothered to do anything about it. They let it get completely out of control, and now they're going completely the other way in each state and trying to control the uncontrollable. You've got 50 moving parts in 50 different places with a central point that doesn't want to do anything.
Yes.
I suppose my first question is the illegal market, have they managed to put a blanket on it in any way whatsoever, or is it exactly the same as it was 12 months ago before the furores, so to speak?
I guess a point of clarification for the question, when you say illegal market, are you talking about the hemp market, or are you talking about straight up legacy, street market?
The hemp, the particular hemp market that they're trying to put the dampener on in each state.
Yeah, so in the last 12 months, we've had several states make moves. Some of them have banned, but some of them have chosen to regulate or altered their regulations. So in some of these states, these products are not actually illegal. Now, technically, if they came into the state or exited the state, that would trigger an FD&C, which would mean FDA has precedent and then becomes illegal again. But there are plenty of states, Minnesota being one of them, where you could grow, extract, process, infuse, package, and sell all legal hemp, and it have to be 100% legal all the way across the board. So in regards to the hemp market, have they really stopped any of the bad actors so far? Not even close. And I think that's the question we're getting at is any of the chaos in the hemp industry, is the bad acting in the hemp industry slowed down because of this note?
Because of this note and because of the endless amendments or senators or members in each state bringing in bills to try and control something they don't understand, because every time I read a bill, it seems they don't understand what they're talking about at all.
That's accurate. I do think that we'll say the fringes and the edges of our industry, they see the writing on the wall and they are making steps to change their business model, but they're going to ride it till the wheels fall off. Why wouldn't you? In their eyes, why wouldn't we keep making money as long as we can? And I think that's going to be true until we have regulations that flat out say you can't do this anymore. So yes, it is slowing things down in some of that regard, but it's not stopping any of it. And there's no additional enforcement dollars. There's nothing else is happening.
That was my next question is you can write as much legislation and enact it, but if you're not enforcing it, it makes absolutely no difference at all. I mean, I would imagine Texas, nothing's changed whatsoever. Just a few press conferences and press releases.
Yeah. Currently products are still gray market legal in Texas, if you will, provided generally when we talk about hemp, just as this may be the wrong thing to do, but generally people all understand that the FDA says you can't do any of this, but we're not going to mess with you as long as you don't make any claims. So with that asterisk being technically illegal, other than that thing, hemp is currently legal in Texas because of how the veto happened, et cetera. And they're now attempting to pass some emergency regulations to at least protect 21 plus and a couple of these big ticket items that are really, really common sense and should have been done from day one, to be blunt. The one thing Texas is doing that I don't love, though, is they're trying to institute a $25,000 license for a retailer to be able to sell these products, which isn't a ban, but it acts like a ban.
Yeah, it acts like a ban and also allows the gray market, black market, illegal market. I mean, they can just sell it under the counter in a smoke shop anytime they want. and you know,
That's exactly right.
and they just take the risk, don't they? I mean,
They absolutely do.
I mean,
Yep.
yeah, we've seen this. I mean, it's an interesting comparison, but this is exactly what's happening with tobacco in Australia, where they've taxed it to the max. So nobody can afford to buy cigarettes anymore. So everybody just buys cigarettes from illegal retailers who aren't paying licenses because the other ones can't afford to pay the licenses and people can't afford to pay the tax. I mean, it's sort of a circular wheel of stupidity almost, this over taxation issue, isn't it? And over licensing issue.
It is. I think taxation is acceptable and appropriate. Overtaxation for a form of penalty to try to force a market to act a certain way becomes very difficult and often unsustainable, and you generally don't hit the goal you're trying to hit. Sin tax generally doesn't work to change people's behavior. What it does is it bolsters the black market, unfortunately.
Now, you head up this hemp organization nationally. You've been in hemp forever. So when I first thought about hemp, I never even thought of, firstly, I'm of the thinking that it's one plant and you separate cannabis and hemp, and it's a bit silly, but that's what we've done. Hopefully we can sort of start fixing that problem. But I always just imagine hemp equals industrial hemp. From the, when I first started writing about this sort of stuff, when you first came into the market, did you immediately think, oh, I can do this for hemp for human consumption rather than being thinking about hemp for creating things?
I did.
How did it start, and what led you towards the consumption side of the market rather than the, let's call it, the production side of the market or creation side of the market?
I got brought in right into the consumption side, even in the early days. So my first foray into this in 2018 was to build and run the Hemp Exchange, which was a supply chain platform.
Yes.
And if you look at the industry in 2018 and say, okay, we're a hemp platform, where's the business? There was no industrial hemp business, nothing significant to speak of. But there was a massive market of hemp, and it was all CBD. And that was actually the goal of Hemp Exchange, because people were buying CBD and then getting scammed and getting powdered sugar and having wire fraud and all kinds of problems. It was unregulated, unmonitored, and all the people that we'll say maybe got pushed out of the marijuana market for questionable behavior. There's
moved into that market and started pissing around.
Into that market to take advantage.
Excuse my English, basically.
Yeah. No, absolutely. They moved in that market, took advantage of it, and then people were getting, farmers and processors who were just like, hey, this is fun. Let's figure out this thing. We're getting scammed by, black market dealers, and it was a big problem. So we tried to stabilize that by playing middleman and basically escrowing between buyer and seller. And in that time, it was very clear that consumption of CBD was the driving revenue factor of the entire market.
And over time, have you, what's your thinking about this, the two sides of hemp and how each market should operate? Because I just think it's a huge loss that nobody anywhere on the planet has managed to develop proper industrialized hemp as they did in the 17th century, that with science in the 21st century could solve and deal with a lot of problems, as well as creating a really profitable market. Why is there no investment in that? Why is there no investment in processing? There's obviously investment in farming because they're growing the product so people can use it to create products for humans to consume. So I'm always really confused by this. I know it's another question to ask you in the same question is it because that McConnell loophole created that situation? And do you think that was by design or just a pure accident or of lack of knowledge? That it seems to me that's the point where this all happened.
So I think it actually happened before that in the 2014 Farm Bill. The 14 Farm Bill's intent was to allow, without fear of persecution, states to run research and development programs to study hemp as a crop. And not almost immediately, but pretty quick, people figured out, I can grow type 3 cultivars, which are high CBD, low THC, and it meets the threshold, so we're going to R&D on that instead.
Yeah.
So there were some groups that just flat out never even R&D'd the fiber and grain side and just R&D'd the CBD side. And part of the stipulations was you could offload this material. And they did. And it boomed really fast. So you have one market that's like, you're literally begging for people to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to create an already commoditized market, which is already there, or invest a little bit into this explosive market and I can 400x your money in a year, right? So that's pretty clear to the investor of like, where am I going to put my dollars? Quick cash that's going to explode or a long, slow burn that will return as minimal as possible. Well, that's what happened, right? So they invested into the CBD side and it exploded. Now there is investment into the industrial side, but the problem with the industrial side right now that a lot of people I'm not the industrial expert. I'm pretty good at it. I was on a policy chair for industrial stuff for quite some time. I'm familiar. I haven't grown it myself, and I don't work in the space. But my understanding from an outsider's perspective is this: very little of our market has done anything to damage the industrial hemp market, other than the felony ban, which isn't the cannabinoid fault; it's the legislation.
Mm-hmm.
But the industrial has its own issue economically. Forget the legislation altogether for a second. You've got China, you have Italy, you have various different countries producing hemp already as a commodity, efficient and inexpensive, and they're already providing the global supply chain and filling the demand to 100%. There's no more demand. What are we going to fill?
So the US has sort of knocked itself out of that market.
Yeah, and the only way to get by it is to get us to commodity scale right off the bat. So the only way we're ever going to compete is we need to flood our country with so much industrial hemp and make it so efficient, and we've gone so large scale that we can compete with hemp coming from China.
And of course, with China, it's cheaper to import it, isn't it?
Currently it is. And so if we don't fix that problem, it's a chicken and the egg issue. We could take over the market if we could get to the scale, but you can't get to the scale without dollars, and we don't have any
and the dollars are going to, there's so many other places the dollars can go to these days, aren't there? So sorry to raise that. I just think it's really interesting because it's that dichotomy that for me, is always there. So in terms of the hemp for human consumption market in the US, what are its next steps, and as a market advocate, what are you trying to do on a federal level, a state level, and in terms of standardizing and building the industry and developing new products?
At a base level, very minimum, we need the federal government to codify the fact that our existence is acceptable. What does that look like? Well, there could be as much or as little as you want there, right? In my dream of dreams, I would wish the federal government to say, hey, this is legal. Here's the federal stuff you need to do. Here's a tax. The rest of it, leave it to the states to figure out. That would be my preference.
Yeah.
But we're seeing how that's playing out right now. We're likely to end up in a lower milligram scenario, 3 to 5 milligrams. We're likely to end up in some ratio requirement of CBD to THC. So there'll probably need to be some CBD with your product, which I'm fine with, actually. And I think we're going to end up with potentially, different channels of cannabinoids and formats going through different channels. So maybe
because science is racing ahead. So and especially with the advent of AI, and I keep talking about this to people and discussing it with them, is over just a big discussion of drugs, science will just develop thousands of them over the next 10 years. Are you seeing that already happening in your particular hemp space, that science is developing a series of new products that can be applied to human use? And how are states and federal governments even aware of that fact? And what are we going to do to regulate it so we don't go through what we just went through in the last decade?
Yeah, we are seeing that. Arguably, part of our problem is that we are seeing that in so much as that scientists are making cannabinoids that give effects that people want, but they're skipping the entire scientific process of
I've got to say,
trial.
no peer reviewed, et cetera, yeah?
Yeah. So they're doing it, but they're doing it wrong. And so we're not seeing a ton of people doing that the right way. There is some movement there. There's a couple things happening, nothing massive to report
So
here.
people are doing it the wrong way. Where is that information heading up? Is it heading towards the legal industry to develop products, or is it just immediately going into really quick bucks in the gray industry?
just going into quick bucks and will eventually cease to exist,
Yeah.
probably.
Okay. And they have no idea by creating something whether it's harmful for humans to put on their bodies or in their bodies.
Yeah, the best we can do with that stuff right now is sort of the old school. You're stuck in the backwoods and you're starving and you see a food item. So how do you test to make sure it doesn't kill you? First, you rub it on your skin and see if you break out. Then you rub it on your lips and see if you break out.
The
Then you lick
classic
it. And
Victorian scientist approach. It's just
yes,
keep taking
the
it. You
Victorian
either
scientists.
survive or die, basically.
Yes, yes. That's where we're at. That's the best science we have right now. Not because we couldn't get more, but because no one's chasing for more. Now, there is actually some scientific evidence on Delta 8. I could back that up for Delta 8 and potentially even HHC. Delta 10, Delta 11. I mean, I could go on THC,
Yeah.
JD, THCP, THCO. So
Yeah,
a lot of
you get to a point where I don't even recognize the
yes,
the
yes, some
names.
random acronym of soup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about we've talked about the actual product and what can be created and how it's not being managed. What about all those little tricky things that things are sold to underage people because they're packaged in a certain way? Is there any understanding and management of that in a sensible fashion across the country at the moment, do you feel? Or do you
Yeah.
feel that it's because every time I ask you a question, you answer it really well, but the answer ends up in, oh, by the way, it's chaos. We know what's happening, but we can't explain to those who meant to know what's happening. I suppose it's a double question is, should states have separate regulatory hemp organizations as they do with the cannabis ones, where people are actually trying to solve these problems?
Yeah, and we do have almost every state has a hemp association of sorts,
Mm.
and then we have multiple national associations. So there are a lot of groups trying to get regulations and trying to get education. The problem is there's a lot of noise right now, and if you're a Congress individual, you work for the government, you're responsible for making decisions across literally every facet of human existence. And you're a half inch deep all the way wide. And so trying to understand our incredibly complicated issue in a very short amount of time is already difficult. But then take
And especially difficult, I'm sorry to say, under this administration, because they've reduced research, they've reduced Congress being able to operate properly, and I presume Congress and the Senate being able to operate properly between one another as well. So every time the conversation seems to lead back to the most dodgy people can make as much money as quickly as possible is the scenario that's been created. Perpetuity almost. That's what it feels like talking to you.
I mean, that's certainly one headline, and that's what we're talking about because that's the catchy news story, right? Is like all the bad, dangerous stuff, and it is a problem, and so it's worth talking about because people need to know. But there's also lots of great headlines in here that are wonderful that we don't talk about because who reports the good news, right? Do we want to talk about the woman in Alabama that won't never touch cannabis but started drinking hemp drinks and now it's solving her sleep issues and possibly some inflammation, and now she's excited, she's quit drinking. These stories are happening nationally. Everywhere. Cannabis normalization is happening faster than it's ever happened before. People are getting healthier because of it. They're turning away from things that are more dangerous to things that are safer. And this is happening at such a rapid pace, it's almost unfathomable. But it's overshadowed by a small percentage of really bad people doing really bad things. And it's unfortunate because really, I know a lot of people in the space, and most people are doing things as best as they can to try to make a good, safe product in an ethical way. But those bad actors, man, they keep being the ones that hit the headlines. They keep being
Of
the
course,
ones.
and the old money that is just say no to everything is really piling in at the moment. Double down on saying everything to do with drugs is bad, and hemp is a great example of badness.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The war on drugs persists in certain minds today still. And, it may, I hope not, but it may require some additional time under our belts before the majority of the population goes, why are we fighting this? This is silly. Because at the end of the day, this is silly. It's a plant you can grow in your backyard. It's not rocket science. It's like a dandelion. Like, what are we talking about?
I know. Well, this is what I always say. One simple plant that's been around for thousands of years, you can put it in the ground, and people call it weed for a reason. It's the same conversation we've all had for
Yeah, yeah.
since we were 14 years old. But I just the amount of complication that has been created out of this conversation
Yeah.
in order to generate revenues for certain bodies or types of people or businesses over that have nothing or no interest in the plant. That's what never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah. I've heard this statement once that the most dangerous thing about cannabis is the laws.
Tell you what, we should just get rid of the law and let everybody do what they want.
Well, no, I don't agree with that. In
I'm
fact,
only teasing. I'm only teasing.
I used to be a so funny story. I used to be a libertarian, which in America, Libertarian Party is like small government, little as possible, et cetera, et cetera. We don't like regulations,
Well, but the
taxes.
hemp industry has taught you not to be.
Yep.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yep. We need regulations because people will take advantage of people for a buck and they will do so all day long unless there's a reason
Well,
not
look,
to.
I agree with you totally. I consider myself a contrarian. So whatever somebody says, I want to say the opposite. But
Yeah,
10 years of writing about this is it legislation and regulation and good policy is absolutely integral to getting it right. But all I'm
agreed.
seeing is bad policy, bad legislation written by people who are clueless about what we're talking about. And the issue seems to be that the minds who understand cannabis and hemp or the plant are the ones who are most pushed away from creating or contributing to that policy. And every time I see a policy organized, not everyone, but a lot of them in the US, they start with the best intentions, but then it's all gala and dinner balls and flying around the country and all this sort of stuff. And they seem to get overexcited by their new position in the world and not concentrating on the issues. Is that something that I see you nodding a bit? Is that something that you've felt and watched over the years?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I continue to, I hate to say it this way, but I continue to sacrifice business progress at the hands of making regulatory progress instead. And so I'm only one human. I can only do so much, right? And I've been trying to build the industry and get regulations and do safe things at the same time of building my company and running my company. So we aren't the biggest company out there. You asked earlier why am I not living in Dubai? Because I spend too much time thinking about the health of the average citizen and the industry's success in general, instead of just can I make money. I could have made a lot of money a long time ago doing things differently, but I sleep well at night and my business is successful. And we may be looking at some activity here soon with that. So I'm not upset about this. And I think we built a great little company. But there are companies out there that are already kicking over $100 million a year annually in this space. And they've only been operating for a couple of years on the high side. And they did that because they put their head down and just focused on making money. Now, I'm not saying those people did anything wrong either, or that they're making bad quality products, but the excitement of, hey, we're going to build this business and we're going to build the regulations. As soon as you start seeing your revenue doubling month over month over month,
They're not
over
interested
month,
in the regulations anymore.
they don't care about the regulations anymore. It's their focus is over here because that's where the entertainment is.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's the same with the big MSOs in Europe at the moment. France is the new mini gold rush, and that they just focus on, okay, there's a new market, let's pull as much money out of it, and then leave it in, a steady
Shambles.
chaos while everybody else
Yeah.
sorts out the problem. And we've got lots of money that I don't know what they do with, but that seems to be how it works. So look, I always ask, no, I don't always ask this question, but I'm increasingly asking it. We're speaking in 12 months' time. Are we having the same conversation or a different conversation?
Totally different conversation. Totally
Why,
different
and
conversation.
why do you think we're having a different conversation?
Oh, because either we don't exist,
Okay.
or
Okay.
we found a solution to it somehow, and we're
So
still around.
you think that is actually the next 12 months, do you?
Oh, I mean, we're illegal in 8 months if we
Yeah.
don't figure it out. So, yep.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'll speaking to you maybe in 9 months then.
Yeah, let's have a chat in November and see where we sit.
Chris, I know I didn't really fixate on any particular thing, but it's such a huge, for me, it's such a huge, convoluted and complicated set of moving parts that I don't really know where to start or begin or try and get a basic understanding. But I think you've helped me sort of get a feeling of where we are now, where we were, and definitely in that last comment, where we're going. And you're from where we came, 2014 rather than 2019 is very interesting, because I always thought of it as 2019, not 2014.
Yeah, and the 18 Farm Bill, they changed the definition. They didn't call it industrial hemp. They pulled the industrial part out, and then they added salts, isomers, derivatives, oils, waxes, extracts, etc. are all not controlled substances. That was an intentional move. And that move was made because of the work that was done the 4 years prior between 14 and 18. And so a lot of people think, well, it's hope not, it's rope not dope, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's true. We didn't pitch anyone they could get high off it. But if you didn't know what CBD was in 2018 and you were in the hemp space, then you weren't actually in the hemp space, because that's all everybody was talking about.
Well, I remember. I mean, it was just everywhere, wasn't it? People were giving it their dogs, and you name it. It was it was all
putting it in toilet paper. It's going into pillows, like CBD, everything.
Yeah. Well, Chris, look, we're almost out of time. Thank you very much for being on the Koala Podcast.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate
I'd love to have you back a couple of times this year, maybe as we go through this sort of roller coaster of what, driving towards a deadline to see what happens at that deadline. So thank you very much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it. Coming, how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.